hope I don't mess that up. All right. Well, hi. Thanks for coming. We're a small but mighty group today. I'm Jen Fruend. I am a professor of biology up at Concordia in Nebraska. So it is a delight being somewhere where the sun is shining, and that's it, where the sun is shining. It's been a little gray for about 5 years, I think, up there. So I'm the type of biologist up at Concordia who teaches about plants and animals and kind of all of the world. But that's just kind of, that's what I do, that's what I am, that's what I love. It just also happens to be my job. So that's good. I also have to introduce my husband back there. He's here for moral support. His name's John Moberly. He's the dean of our College of Business as well. So we are nothing alike, but we happen to like each other, and it's kind of nice working with him. So that works out. But I would like to just put a name and a face if you have questions about perhaps Masters of Business programs or people who are interested in entrepreneurship. He'll be giving a talk later as well. So that'll be fun. Okay, but I'm here to talk about Christian stewardship. So I already introduced myself as a biology professor, but for me it kind of comes from that first chapter of Genesis where God starts with talking about the world, right? He talks about stars, and he talks about the moon, and water, and plants. And so in my book, in my eyes, when God starts off that way, it must be something that matters. And perhaps I just took it as a hint that maybe that's kind of where God was leading me. So I love this quote. This is from Rachel Carson. Those who dwell among the beauties and the mysteries of the earth are never alone or weary of life. I had one of our colleagues at Concordia. He's not a science person. He's one of the cabinet people who make decisions all day. He noticed on my social media all summer long I was posting pictures of little tiny bugs or whatever in my garden, and he came up to me in church and he said, "Do you just spend like 10 hours a day in your garden?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, probably." He does it. It's an endless supply of entertainment. But I have to be honest, it's a little bit more than that. And we've all had those moments in time where you've been somewhere just so beautiful and it took your breath away. Does that sound familiar? Does anybody want to share one of those times? Do it.
We were coming from, we were in Colorado, I don't know, somewhere on west. But we were coming from Reno and going, we're going to end up on the west side of Lake Tahoe. And coming up from Reno and just up over the mountain and get to the top. And,
yes, that feeling. But I remember the feeling.
Just coming up the top and go over and it's just all spread out for you.
Just glorious. You know exactly, you can relate. Is there another, that very specific view, the one that just grabs you? Yes. Yes. It is so beautiful. Any other aha or moments?
I live in Hawaii.
Oh, every day.
But we never grow tired. They call us the Rainbow State, and we do never grow tired of a beautiful rainbow. Yes.
Oh, I'm a little jealous. My daughters get kind of frustrated. I'll show you here in a minute, but I will always pull over for a rainbow. It doesn't matter if we're running late, I will always pull over because you can't safely sit and stare at it while you're driving, right? Same thing for a sunset. I am a very fortunate professor because this is my classroom. I mean, I have other classrooms, I guess, but this is my classroom. Psalm 19:1 is probably fairly familiar to many of you. The heavens declare the glory of God. This has kind of become that theme verse, that that bonding phrase that holds our science department together at Concordia, Nebraska. At Concordia, we are very, very fortunate and unique as a small university to have a very diverse set of sciences for our undergrad students. So while we can specialize and place students in a lot of different areas, we are able to place them and give them experiences in a lot of different areas. It's not just health science, it's not just science education, it's not just chemistry, it's a lot of different areas. So this is my classroom, and when I say that this is our phrase, for me as an ecology professor, that I'm out there. This is a picture I took at dawn with students. They were with me as the sun was rising. We didn't want our small mammals that we were trapping to get too cold, so you have to get there early. And then I took them another class out at nighttime to watch the stars come out for a conservation of park systems type of class. That was a little humbling because they are outdoor adventure-y kinds of students, and while I planned for every kind of scenario, they were quite comfortable being in the prairie at dark. And then I looked out into the prairie and I thought, I hope they come back. But that's one of the joys of having students who are over 18. But okay, so that's a little bit of that lens where I'm coming from, a brief introduction of who I am. So this is my family. I already introduced you to John back there, but also I have a 9-year-old and I have a 13-year-old, and all of these other snippets and pictures are bits from my yard. And we have, I live in town, but we like to pretend it's a farm. We have chickens and we have ducks, and I'm always yelling at them in between my garden. It's my own fault for putting chickens and ducks in the middle of my garden. But this is how we live, and we thrive in watching all of the little things in life. But it carries on into my family at Concordia. So again, just a little bit of background so you know who I am. There's going to be a lot of pictures of my students. I can't help it. They're just my babies. I am very fortunate to also call these places my classroom at Concordia. So I teach in the ocean. I'm getting ready to go there in a couple weeks to Belize. This pathway is one of those moments my students started to laugh at me. We were coming down, we were in Ecuador, and we were coming down from the mountains, from the very, very tall Andes, into that Amazon basin. And all of that fog there is just all of that humidity from the rainforest. And it's one of those, I'm still getting goosebumps. It's just one of those moments that nerdy kids like me used to read about in the library, right? You know those kids. They would read the books and just dream about it. And I was that kid, but then I became that teacher and I became that professor. And now here I am bringing a busload of kids who were those kids into the rainforest. I just burst into tears. And of course, the students are like, ooh. But then I was like, you guys, it's the Amazon. We only saw this in library books. And then of course they got all emotional. We're just a mess. But we do all kinds of things while we're there. There they are holding a barracuda. This is in Costa Rica. This is that's in the Galapagos Islands. So I've been able to take my students a lot of different places. And it comes from this drive that God has set before us. So I love this slide. This is my daughter Adeline. She's 13 now. She would be mortified that I'm showing you a picture of her in her diaper. But this is Adeline learning, right? Babies just put things in their mouth. How many of you have been around a baby at least remotely? You've seen them. Or you put things in your mouth. Yes. See, I knew it. I love it. What's your role in life? You're a pastor. That's good. That's good. Okay. So what I love is that a lot of humans, most of them, enter this planet as a baby, right? And as babies do, they grow, they explore, they're shoving everything in their mouths, or you try to get them to crawl, and you try to entertain them with a toy over here, but they find this minuscule piece of dust that they probably shouldn't put in their mouth over here, and that's the thing that motivates them. They are born scientists. That's collecting data, right? Like that's collecting data. This is a little bit more of a formal look at the girls doing some school night, but I don't know if you have Bibles or if it's convenient to look it up, or I can just summarize. Whatever brings you joy brings me joy. This one's kind of easy because it's the same chapter. And while I do caution anyone in taking one or two verses in whatever context they're talking about instead of a whole passage and giving the appropriate context, I tried to keep it short. So this is Proverbs 23, and I have verse 12. If anybody wants to just shout it out with vigor.
Apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge.
I love that. See, like, bam, you should learn stuff. I'm sorry, is it okay to paraphrase like that in Pastor World? Okay, all right, good. I do that a lot.
I hope so.
I love it. Okay, how about verse 23, a few little verses lower?
Somebody else?
Buy truth, do not sell it. Buy wisdom, instruction, and understanding.
I love it. I do kind of giggle at this one because I work for a university that charges tuition, so I don't really know how to feel about that. But it does say to buy it, right? I don't know. I'm not reading too far into that, but I do. Depending on the translation, I use whatever my church uses, but. Yeah, we should get in there. We should just grab on to every little bit of wisdom and knowledge that the world has to offer, and there is so much. I think for me, there's a couple of things that cause my heart to stress a little bit. One thing is when people tell me they don't like science, because they were born a scientist, so something happened. And I do realize that everybody has their own calling, but we do need to be a citizen who can operate and love this planet that we are on. The other thing is that sometimes people I have encountered in the church or the larger scale of the church, not just Lutherans, get a little bit tense when you start talking about science in a churchy context. Have any of you encountered that a little bit? It gets a little tense sometimes. And I want to just start breaking that down. Because for me, that comes with a whole lot of dangerous baggage. Because science can be a joy. For me, I'm pretty nerdy, right? In my background here, I've got some math. Are any math people here? You like math, okay. So there's calculating logarithms, but I always kind of joke that I do all natural logs. Thank you. That's more than I get from anybody else, so thank you. I keep trying. But this is the context that we do it. We're not just doing it on the chalkboard, although we're literally doing it on the chalkboard, but we're out collecting that real data. For me, this is just 10 minutes away from my classroom. Just down the road, we could set some traps. My students are out there. They're learning all kinds of things. And while it is the crack of dawn for college students, it does offer moments of joy to celebrate, which raises a lot of questions. First of all, what on earth are we trapping? And how many of you, in just looking at that slide, are thinking, why? Why is she trapping mice? Supper, yes. We could. Don't tell my husband, but it gets a little sketchy. Yeah. All right. Yeah, maybe. Why? Yeah. So mice, I gotta admit, they're not my favorite. They're a little bitey. They smell funny, and they carry disease. Not my favorite. However, they're easy to handle and easy to count, and I can always know that I'm going to capture them. So we can do a lot of math, but just in this one prairie, in this area right here, we have 3 different rodent species, 4 different rodent species that we can capture. We can calculate populations, and we can see what that means for other bird populations. We can really go along with this as we want. This is not my best graph. This was me in fact, I probably took it from a student paper. It just slapped it up here. This is one thing they do, is they calculate population sizes. And I know this isn't just looking at population sizes, and this is not an ecology class, but any general observations? These are, the different colors are representing different species, if you're curious. Does it stay consistent over time? No, it kind of goes up and it goes down and it goes up again and goes down again. And so natural questions start coming out of that. Well, why is that? Why was it that sometimes this red it's just a mouse. Why do we have, most of the time we don't have any, but then periodically we get some? Why is that? That's curious to me. Well, for my class, and you don't have to memorize any of this, but I'm just kind of sharing some of the joy, right? And so for some of the joy, we can go out, we can collect, we can ask all these questions, and it leads us to these different kind of models that we can set up. Aren't they fun? Like, if you're going to graph, you may as well make a curly Q on it, right? Like, I feel like sometimes we get inundated with scientists sharing all of these graphs, and we're like, I don't know, I'll just see a bunny rabbit on there. Well, but this is actually showing a relationship of predators and prey. And if you look prey here and predators here, if prey numbers go down, then predator numbers are going to go down. And if predator number goes down, then prey is going to go up eventually. So then you get this interplay of interrelationships. And these are just different models, which leads us to this, which is just mere chaos, right? Like all kinds of interactions that we're looking at here. This is not just like predator-prey interactions. This is like competition between mice. And again, this is really nerdy, but I'm just sharing the joy. This is a type of joy because it exists. It is there, and it can tell us about our environment. And while we might not like mice a whole lot, I do like owls a lot more. Are any of you into birds? Birds? Okay, yeah, I definitely have my binoculars over there. So I love birds, and I particularly love birds of prey, things that eat other things. I don't know why, but I guess I like snacks, and I appreciate that they have to work hard for their snacks. I don't know. And to me, those mice populations might give me the willies, but they keep my owls alive. And when I have big floods over Nebraska and it takes out some of my prairies, what's that going to do to my owl populations? And then other years when I have, West Nile virus coming through and attacking some of my owl populations, how is that going to help me predict how many mice I'm going to catch in the fall with my students? So those kinds of things become quite fascinating. This is the world that we gave us. Does this graph look familiar to any of you from way back in the day when you were a biology student? This is a pretty foundational study about the famous lynx and the snowshoe hare. And the lynx, of course, eats the snowshoe hare, and the populations kind of go up and down in relationship to each other. Well, what's kind of fun is that this is a classic study, but when you look at what a snowshoe hare eats, they're also predators. Now, their prey happen to just kind of grow in one place and not run away. It's, plants, but they are predators. So they also would have a relationship of the world around them. What this reveals to me is that while we can look at little bits of details, those little bits of details are part of this much bigger story. I kind of joke around with my students that if they don't know an answer to a test question, they can quote Psalm 139 verse, I think it's 6, might be 5, which is, oh, you want to do it? I love this one. Psalm 139. I should have put it up here, but it was a spontaneous add-in, sorry.
139.
Yeah, maybe 5, but probably 6.
6. Such knowledge
Yes.
is a wonderful woman.
Isn't that the best? Such knowledge is just too wonderful for me. I can't even. Yeah, that is my favorite. My favorite. But it's my favorite because my world that I teach about is a really complicated world. It's not just the snowshoe hare and the lynx. It's the woody browse. It's the ruffled grouse. And who knows what the rain was doing during all of that time. So my world is very complicated. Your world is very complicated. And little pieces add up to being a very significant part. So I shared a whole lot of way too much information. But it always comes down to this question. So what? Who cares? Well, here's a little backstory. I'm a happy biology professor now. In my mid-40s, I have children, I play outside, the world is hunky-dory. The world was always pretty hunky-dory for me. I've had a very good life. I was born into a Lutheran family, baptized as a baby, Lutheran schools all the way through high school. I went to a different Concordia, but I don't know, one of them out there. It was a very good experience. I can't say that. But what happens is that here I am, young Jen Fruend, and with my little pack on. Hello. And I was always a nerdy kid. I was very happy digging holes in the backyard, much to my parents' frustration, or reading the encyclopedia. I was pretty self-entertained. Encyclopedia, that was like before the internet. And that's kind of how I did life. When you have a kid who goes through and loves science, they're eventually going to start asking really big questions. My parents were very loving and fabulous, are very loving and very wonderful humans. But they didn't go to college. They just said, go get them, Jen Fruend, and they were very supportive. But they didn't know how to help me with some of my questions. A lot of times those big questions went unanswered in a lot of my science classes, and I was only taught things like, well, scientists are going to tell you this, but they're wrong. And to me, I was like, oh, okay. And I go through that. Scientists are going to tell you things, but they're wrong. And then I became older, and I started to go to grad school, and my grad school experience kind of took many turns. This is a dinosaur bone that I was excited and very accidentally a part of. This is me when I started my well, that's not me, but I started my master's degree in archaeology and anthropology. I hung out with paleontologists, and I did a lot of work in conservation biology. That was kind of my weird meandering way through graduate school. And just by looking at those 3 content areas, you can probably imagine that I came across a lot of people who were not Christian and looked at me like I had a really ridiculous perspective on life. And I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know. I'm a generally nice person. I can get along with almost anybody. And I didn't know how to handle that. And for me, that experience was earth-shattering. I didn't know who to ask. My religious people in my life were telling me, well, those people are probably not people you should hang out with. However, they were my science mentors. They were my career mentors. So it's like I was lost in the middle, and I didn't know what to do about that. It took me a long time, a lot of personal reflection, and honestly, watching my husband get baptized as an adult, that was a powerful, life-changing experience. And those kinds of things are feelings that I do not want any of my students to ever go through. So when I say science is a joy, it is such a joy. Does that mean I know all of the answers? No, absolutely not. And if any of my students think I know all the answers, I have failed them, truly. But what I do want them to know, and one thing, and kind of some basic messaging that I want us to remember that this universe that we are living in, it is going to exist simultaneously with us being very curious humans. I always give the students examples like, have you ever sat at a restaurant, and it's harder now because I don't hear as well as I used to, but let's say 10 years ago when I was hearing a little bit better, you would hear maybe a juicy conversation at a table next to you. Do you remember any of that? And you strain to listen. Why? Why do people strain to listen to that? Do we know those people? Are we remotely invested in their experience? No, it has no bearing on our life whatsoever, but we just have to know. And there are theological reasons for that, philosophical reasons for that, but the reality is we are born to be a curious being. God created us to be observant and curious beings. So here we are, in our human curiosity, and here the universe is existing, all at the same time. So why wouldn't God want us to look at it and wonder and just want to measure it in as many ways as we can? In addition, and I'll talk about this here in a minute, God expects us to shepherd his creation. He put it out there, and then he made us to take care of it. Well, I'll go over that in a minute. So we have a job to do. We are curious beings with a job to do. And finally, and I really love this, and I have to be honest, I took it from, not word for word, but I took the basic gist from an article that I could not find again. It's just in my head. But Christianity, our belief system, can provide this belief framework, and I really love that word, framework, that helps us understand how and why we go about doing science. How and why. It's not giving us all the answers one way or the other. It's giving us a lot of important answers, but maybe not everything. But it gives us that how and that why, which is what drives us. And what I mean by that how and that why, it drives us with our ethical decisions that we're making. It makes us really question, is this helping us with what God is asking us to do? And what is this doing to help promote his kingdom here on earth, right? So that is a beautiful thing. I'm sorry for pictures of myself, I don't like it, but I just wanted to put this out here. Can you see what I'm holding? Yeah, actually, this one's definitely a bald eagle. This one's actually a juvenile bald eagle. It does look a lot like a golden eagle. I've had golden eagles, but this is a juvenile. Now, do they look healthy to you? No, especially this one. This one's really sick. This one right here. This one pulled it together. He had some really nasty things going on, but was able to complete recovery. So I work with a program with Raptor Conservation Alliance. This is not something everybody has to do. I just like it, so I do. And what I do, and my students help me with this, is we go out and we get calls for various injured birds, and we go and we get them. Sometimes some of my biology students will ask me, well, why don't you let nature take its course? That's not a bad question. I appreciate and respect that question a lot. And sometimes that is the right thing to do. Birds of prey have kind of a different role in the world. They are managers, kind of like here we are as top managers, and they're also managing things, right? They keep things in a lot of balance, and they keep some really nasty animals in balance, which I really appreciate. Unfortunately, some of them, and you're probably familiar with some of these situations, encounter things that are human caused. So animals die. That happens. Animals, like I always kind of joke around, things like peregrine falcons, they fly so fast. And I always, every year we get calls of a young peregrine falcon who crashes into something. And I compare it to giving a 15-year-old a Ferrari, right? A crash is going to happen. And they do that. Crashes happen, nature happens, but then there's situations that are human-caused events. Some of them quite by accident. You know, it's not like we plan for a bird to run into our windows, or when you're driving down the highway, you can't always avoid a collision, right? But it's because those human things are there that those birds came into injury. Humans are very successful at taking over a whole planet, so it kind of creates some tension with nature. So this is my way of saying, okay, this is a way to counteract some of the damage that we're doing. Unfortunately, both of these eagles have something called lead poisoning. Lead poisoning, I'm sure you've heard of with children, babies, sometimes, you know, peeling paint on walls or chewing on car keys or something can increase temporarily or permanently lead content in their blood. For humans, it can interfere with learning, with behavior control, with even life processes. With eagles, it does the same thing. Now, this is not an anti-hunting campaign. I'm a hunter, I'm a gun owner. This is not that is not where I'm trying to go with this. But our hunters are often our best partners in conservation. That's not where I'm going with this. What I'm trying to point out is sometimes the choices we make, even by accident, like having lead-based ammunition, like lead shot can cover a field pretty quickly, and that lead shot can wash off into streams and bioaccumulate through fish and other organisms in a stream system that an eagle might eat. Or should a deer get away from you while you're hunting, or pheasant or whatever. Eagles are notoriously lazy, scrappy hunters. They're going to go over the things that are injured. And if it gets away from a hunter, which it happens even to the best hunters, they're going to eat it, and they can consume even tiny bits of lead can wind up killing an eagle or making it rehabilitatable. My point is this: God loves his creation. He put things out there to, what? Oh, I'm sorry, did you? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, I wanted to make sure I didn't skip one. God loves his creation very much. That is a non-negotiable. I think we all are on the same page there. What I love digging into, and I kind of mentioned this right in the beginning, is that God opens this epic story, this beautiful book of a Bible, right? This huge message. And he spends not one, but 2 chapters talking about nature. To me, that's sort of a big deal. He starts the entire epic thing with nature. There's some other important stuff in there too, I promise, but nature is a part of it. He spends a lot of time working on stars and earth and ocean and animals and plants and all of these things, you know, those 6 days. And humans were a part of that 6 days. But there was a lot of other stuff in there too. So he spends a lot of time telling us about the creation that he loves. And I love some of the language in there. That's kind of where he's telling us what to do. I'm making you be fruitful, multiply, that stuff. But also, he uses some very specific language on how to take care of it. We know this answer, right? Hey, good job. These are just some of many, many verses. I could have covered the whole slide with verses saying, this is my creation, this is all of the things. I'm pretty sure 95 5.2% of the Psalms are all about God's glory in his creation. I love Psalm 104. I'll come back to that. God not only loves his creation, but he trickles in some really interesting conservation plans in the Bible. So I'm a conservation biologist. I talk about that a lot, writing management plans for different species. And then here, God goes doing it right there in the Bible. Now, I'm pointing to some really heavy hitters here, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. Everyone loves reading those books. So this is a good one. Leviticus 22-28. Anybody got that one? This is kind of a fun one. It's kind of a gross one, but it's fun. Not totally gross.
Slaughter an animal, bird or flock on the same day as its young.
Right? That's pretty straightforward. This is in a list of lots of rules. And then they throw in things like this, which I'm sure have a lot of cultural meaning. But for me as a conservation biologist, I think, probably not a good idea to kill young and parents, because now you've taken out 2 generations. Okay, good. How about Deuteronomy 22:6 and 7?
If a bird's nest happens to be before you along the way, any tree or on the ground, with young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall surely let the mother go and take the young for yourself, that it may be well with you and that you may prolong your years.
Isn't that interesting? So you probably think, why is he saying take the babies? Well, I don't know. Maybe food. Oh, did you have an idea?
Well, if you take the mother, something else is going to kill the young.
Exactly. Something else is going to kill the young anyway. Also, and often, and it depends on the species, it's not every bird, but if you take away the young, that mom is going to try to get out and do another reproductive cycle before the end of the season. It's amazing like that. Cheetahs, in fact, well, I know it's not a bird, but if they only have 1 or 2 young, they'll abandon them in hopes that they can go get pregnant again and have a larger litter. It sounds cruel, but that's how nature works. And so here, God's using it to tell a bigger message. Again, I am just pulling out a couple of verses that I found interesting, little management plans. Here's a big one. Everyone loves the book of Numbers. 35, Numbers 35, 1 through 5. A little bit of a bigger chunk. Not as exciting.
I have it. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, Command the people of Israel to give to the Levites some of the inheritance of their possession as cities for them to dwell in. And you shall give to the Levites pasture lands around the cities. The cities shall be theirs to dwell in, and their pasture land shall be for their cattle and for their livestock and for all their beasts. The pasture lands of the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall reach from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits all around. And you shall measure outside the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits, the city being in the middle. This shall belong to them as pasture land for their cities.
Okay, I don't really care about the measurements, but what's God doing there? He's laying out a city plan. Yeah, laying out a city plan. And he's saying, okay, you need some pasture land. We can't develop it all. We need some pasture land. Now, yeah, for grazing and whatnot, but we need green space around our cities, is how I interpret that. Loose interpretation. I don't know. I'm sorry. So what's our job then? Which is kind of funny because I pulled from the book of Job. I don't know. I'm sorry. I was a middle school teacher back in the day, if that helps excuse some of the bad jokes. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I love this section. You can look it up if you want. I can paraphrase. This is kind of one of my favorite graphics that the internet produced. But it's sort of kind of this, it almost feels a little new age, right? And there's a bigger story to it, but it's asking us to listen to the animals, to talk to the birds. The fish are going to tell us stuff. Like, that sounds a little weird. But But you've all experienced those moments that were beautiful on this planet. It gave you a moment of peace, a moment of wonder, and to me, that's a bit of communication. Or maybe you've looked at something and got a little scared. Did that ever happen to you? Anybody want to share that? John, what would be something you would find that's scary?
Snakes.
Uh-huh. And what did your wife have several of when we met? Uh-huh. Big snakes. Yep. It was that I was in the... It's a long story. So it's one of those things that even though it was a negative feeling, it was still a communication that happened with him, right? There was a message. Now, hopefully, maybe in the years that we've known each other, you've kind of learned that sometimes animals have a way of communicating, and we don't always have to have fear. Like I always keep tarantulas in my classroom. Let me tell you, that's always a popular one. But I like it because almost everybody's kind of scared of a tarantula. I like it because tarantulas have tiny little brains, which means they can't lie to me. There's no lying, there's no plotting, there's no scheming. If they're gonna bite me, I know it. Like they're gonna rear up. Easy peasy. It's not hard to figure it out. And as opposed to me, you just kind of trust me that I'm not going to bite you. Like all of you walked in today and nobody asked me if I was going to bite them. Now you're like, why didn't I go to that other session? But for real, you know, I'm just smiling and you never know. I mean, I guess I don't want to lose my job, but you know, and it's the same kind of thing that there are messaging that happens here. But then God tells us that we're supposed to take care of this. Now here, I had to kind of put a little bit of heavy stuff in there. You took some Hebrew back in the day, right? You remember all of it, right? Do we have other pastors? Yeah, you're a pastor. You remember all your Hebrew too? No. I knew none. I gotta tell you, I've never taken a Hebrew class. And our poor theology department, sometimes they get really random questions from me and they're like, why are you asking this? But I come across this. So what I love doing is when we get into chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis, it does things like tell us to take care of the earth. They'll use words like you have dominion over earth or tend to the earth. And those are English translations. And of course, those of you who have had various types of Bible translation types of classes know that there's a lot of different ways that those words have come about and been translated. But we always go back to that original Hebrew, right? So I figured, well, I guess I should go back to that original Hebrew. And these words popped out, Radah and Kabash. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I feel like you just plunge in and say it. Awesome. And so Radah and Kabash kind of go with chapter 1, Abad and Shamar go with chapter 2. And these words are used in a lot of different ways scripturally, but you kind of go with where you have parallel types of usage in other parts of scripture to help you come up with the appropriate translation. And what we have here is that we're not coming in as this domineering person. I kind of compare it to me trying to parent our chemistry professor. John, how would you, if he were my child, John Jerkin, how would you describe him? Quiet, incredibly smart, and he does not like being outside. We are both incredibly passionate people in very opposite ways. We are very good friends and we've co-taught together, but we are very opposite humans. So it makes my students giggle when I say, what if I was Mr. Dr. Jerkin's mom? And they're all like, oh, he would just die. And I think he might. But here's the thing. I could be that mom who forces him to go play outside, or I could be that mom who looks at him and understands that that is not what he needs to thrive. If any of you have ever been around a child or a student, you have your expectations, but you're not going to force them into one thing or another. You're going to look at what they need and help them thrive in the way they should go, right? And so with my own children, of course I want them to be biologists, but do either of them want to be a scientist, John? No, they both want to go to law school and be like in charge of the universe. So I don't know. I don't know what I did wrong. I raised them both the same way, but there you have it. They want to be lawyers. I think they just want to talk a lot or change the world. The dad. And so they have this idea that you're not coming in as this domineering force, but you're ruling in the image of God. We are built in the image of God, and therefore we should kind of take maybe some of his leadership skills and saying that, okay, we can look at nature and what does nature need us to do, not what do I want nature to do. A slight difference. There's a lot more to that. Here, I promised you more pictures. Here are some. This is in Ecuador, but we've done this at many different places. They're doing food prep for animals. So again, why? Why are they doing this? This is a rehab place where some of the animals have been taken illegally out of the into the pet trade, and they're being kind of rehabilitated, or injured wildlife or whatnot. Again, in the Amazon rainforest, students have been doing, I integrate kind of service learning in all of my trips and experiences. So they give back. It's just a way of letting them be and thrive in the way that nature in that realm needs. Again, these are students of mine doing releases. So I don't just get injured animals. Sometimes we get to release them back to nature, which is pretty awesome. Sometimes it's really emotional and you want to keep those animals as a pet. Almost all of my students say, can we just keep it? You know, and maybe if you've had children, they've brought home something, can we keep it? And the students are the same way. They know better, but their hearts are big. And it's not what nature needs. It needs to go back. Little bits that you can do. This is an extreme example. These are my students on the barrier reef, cleaning up trash. This is just a typical walk along the top of a reef. It is covered in plastic. So a lot of times people say, well, what do I do? I don't know. Every person's going to find their own path of what you're going to do. But if I can make some suggestions, just looking at the sheer amount of one-use plastics that cover our barrier reefs, it's pretty astounding.
I'll just share an example. So right now it's whale season in Hawaii, and we've had a few humpback whales wash up on our beaches, and they're no longer living. But as they look at the whales after, they're finding most of their insides are filled with these plastics.
Yeah. I'm getting ready to take students back here to Belize. We'll do the same project again. We also do another project where we kill lionfish, which seems counterintuitive, but lionfish are terribly invasive, and they are garbage disposals of all of the living biodiversity that actually belongs there. The students will dissect stomachs and do counts of various species, and then, yes, they will learn how to clean their own fish. But when we snorkel, we spend like 7 days snorkeling, and every single time when I'm snorkeling, I see some transparent blobby thing. And I'm a fairly experienced, educated person with a large brain, and I have to stop and think, is that a jellyfish? Or is that a plastic bag? And that's a hard thing for me to decide. Now imagine my brain is a lot smaller and I'm a hungry sea turtle. It would look a lot different. So little things like that. This is a throwback to when I used to teach middle school and elementary school. We used to do litter pickups. This is in the state of Missouri. They provided t-shirts, so put 10-year-olds in t-shirts and they look super cute. Or we tore out invasive species and replanted with seeds that we collected and grew and then replanted into the habitat that they helped clear out, which was pretty cool. Little simple things. None of them are terribly huge, and you don't have to do all of them. Just little things for what works with you. What can I do? That's always the question that I get. So again, I have kind of 4 take-home messages here. God's universe is so big and wondrous, and it is good and okay to learn about it. It's okay. Do it. Don't be scared. If somebody loves biology, it's okay. Do it. Give them a happy home that they can talk about it, a happy church life, a happy youth group, a place where they can talk about what they're learning and celebrate that with them. The joy and the glory of God, all of this world. I know, and I've been avoiding even saying the word evolution because I want the take-home message from this to be that science and nature is bigger than that discussion. That discussion is a way to shut down a lot of conversations about science. That doesn't have to get shut down. Now that's probably a conversation for a whole other day, and we can talk about that. And I'm not saying that we ignore it, but I'm saying it's so much bigger. The world is so much bigger than that one thing. And for some people, it's not, and that makes me sad because they're missing out on so much because of that. I think this is pretty important. We live currently, and we need to plan for future generations. We have the hope of a new kingdom and a new earth that God's going to give us, but I don't know when that's going to be. And I want to make sure that my babies and my grandbabies and all of my owls and their grandbabies all have this happy planet to live on, right? I don't want them to be worried or anything, and that sits in the back of my head constantly. So, and then the last thing is that everything we're doing right now, like sitting in this room, is a part of nature. We may not be outside, but we are in nature right now inside this room. So what I mean by that is when it rains, it's raining where we're sitting. It just happens to get diverted, right? Our trash, we might be throwing it away, but it's still part of nature, right? So all of those experiences, it's not like we can escape. We're not in some separate universe. So I guess maybe if you need to just start anywhere, my place that I love starting is maybe take the phrase taking a walk through Psalm 104, right? There's so much rich stuff there. You can flip through it if you want, and there's fun names of animals or plants or things that are in there. But what's kind of neat is you can take a walk through it. You can have moments where you celebrate the sky, where you can celebrate sea creatures. And I think of that, I kind of say that with a little bit of a giggle because I live in Nebraska, the only triply landlocked state in the, and I teach marine biology, right? But so how do I teach about these sea creatures in a relevant way? Well, I actually, this happened, I'm teaching fish biology this semester, and I asked them to download and use this app called a debris tracker app, which is just citizen science. They pick up trash, they document it, and it kind of geolocates the trash that they're picking up. It goes to a big citizen science database that gets used to learn how trash moves through the planet and a lot of other things. It's kind of cool. But one of the students said, what does picking up trash have to do with learning about fish? And I was like, wow, how did we get this far and we don't know that answer? So I said, we have a field trip. And so we dropped everything and we ran outside, and they just know to follow me because I have an idea. I'm not going to communicate why it's taking up too much time. And we just run and we go, and there's a storm drain, and it says, have any of you looked at it, or is it just me who stares at weird things like that?
This drains to, well, in California, to the ocean.
Yes, yes, and it usually says don't put trash in here or something like that. It drains in Nebraska. It says stream, but ocean, yeah. It drains to it. There's no magical filter there. It goes straight into a waterway, and so that's kind of what I showed. I said, well, how would trash get here? And we kind of talked about all of those reactions. So taking a walk through Psalm 104 can get you started on a lot of different little projects, and without overwhelming you. Just by naturally reading through that one chapter, your brain or your community or your youth group or your class is going to kind of hone in on something interesting. And then the next phrase should be, well, what are we going to do about it? God said we're supposed to take care of it, so what are we going to do? And then oftentimes, especially kids, they're so good at coming up with solutions. There's little things. We can do a lot of litter pickups. I do probably 2 of these a year where we fill up my truck multiple times. And we work with Game and Parks or the Conservation Department where we live. Litter's easy. It's easy and it's kind of fun because it's almost like you're eavesdropping on other people's lives. Like, yeah, why did they leave this here? You know, it's just a fun thing. There's water quality testing that you can do. There's tree monitoring, anything to get them outside and seeing things that are just part of this beauty and wonder that God gave us to learn and love. I put this slide in here to remind me to ask you for your ideas. This is kind of a way to maybe talk or share or ask questions. And that's it. But yes, talk. Are there any questions or ideas or things that your congregations or communities do?
One of our students, we have a stream that runs behind our school, and one of our students for his science fair project was trying to increase the native fish population of the stream. So he captured the invasive fish and then bring them back. And he was so proud when he caught more than one of the native fish species, and he said, God gave me a miracle, Miss Kayla.
Oh.
And I am not a science teacher or anything, but it is so cool when the kids do have that joy of discovery.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing. Yeah.
It is. And just by being a fellow person here on planet Earth, I would say you're a science teacher.
Yeah.
Just a little personal bias there. Because at some point you were that baby who put things in your mouth. There you go. Any other questions or ideas or thoughts?
They just share a love, for it.
I agree.
I have a son, he's a birder, and he will wait somewhere where there's something rare or hard to see that he's found. He'll wait for people to come so he can share it with them.
Oh.
You know, and it's just, I mean, he just, yeah, just share it with people. They can get them excited when they didn't think they had that joy or excitement.
I love that. I love that. It is so exciting, and to see a young child, I'm a birder, and you see where we live, things like robins are pretty common, right? But when a child identifies it independently and can explain things like the orange on it or the wing bars, they get so excited. So I can say things like, oh, that's just a robin. Or I can say, you did it, that is a robin. I wonder where it lives, right? So now there's more to this story. I love that. I totally have my binoculars if anybody wants to go birding later. My poor husband, our whole drive from Seward to Omaha to the airport, he had some caffeine and was very talkative. And I spent the entire hour and a half on my app looking up places to bird down here. So, a little miscommunication on how we were spending that hour of time. I was listening, John. All of your words, I just drooled over every moment. Oops. Any other questions or ideas?
What was that app that you
said about the how to track the.
Oh, yeah, it's
Is
called,
it free or is
it's free, yes. It's, here, let me pull it up. Oh, yeah. Now, one thing I did learn is that you need to, what do you call it? Record the trash where you pick it up. Because I'm always a person who goes back and tries to enter everything. My whole litter pickup, I have to go back there and redo it. It's called Marine Tracker app. Although you don't have to be by a marine area. Marine Debris Tracker. I'm sorry, I don't know if I said that. It's from National Geographic. It's pretty cool. And you can classify your trash. It's kind of fun. I'm a slightly competitive person. A lot of my students are very competitive people. So sometimes the way to their heart is to create a little competition in the classroom. We currently have 2 going. One is who can get the most trash, and then we have subcategories who can get the most of this category or that category. And my other competition is March Mammal Madness, which is just like a bracket for basketball or something, but it's for animals. But it's not a game of chance, it's science, I promise. I had to run that by HR. When I put up a bracket, and like the next day we got an email saying there's no games of chance on Concordia's campus. I thought, I promise it's just science. All right, well, thank you all for coming. I think I was supposed to go to 4:30, but nobody needs to sit that long, I don't think. Oh, I wish I had you as my student. Do you want to go outside? Oh, I gotta say, my classes never get out early. I take that full 50 minutes. Sometimes I do 51, and then I say they should go to the business office and pay that extra minute. I don't think they ever do. But, yeah. Absolutely, my pleasure. Take the free bags and one for a friend. And they should definitely major in biology, environmental science, or I guess business.
But whatever, go to Concordia class.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the one you graduated.
Well, yeah,
Which was?
Mequon. It was beautiful, I gotta say. I spent a lot of time wandering around. Yeah. I had this one professor, did anybody go to Wisconsin? Yeah, okay. So my favorite professor was Dr. Arnholt, Phil Arnholt. And he, maybe not too charismatic in the classroom, but outside, he was amazing. But you never knew it unless you were walking right by him, because he would just kind of mumble stuff. And then he would always go, and he always smoked a pipe. And then he would go, ha. You know, I'll never be that cool. I don't smoke a pipe. I guess that's part of it. But yes, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Oh, and that's my email address if you need anything. If I don't know the answer, I know people, so I'll chase them down. Yeah, have fun. Go play outside. I will. She's so wonderful. She goes to our church with us. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, we go in Calvary and Lincoln. So yeah.
She was my DC.